Imagine the physical toll of travel back in the ancient Near East.
Oh, it was brutal.
Yeah, you have been walking for days through this arid, unforgiving terrain.
Right.
The roads are rough, the hills are steep, and the sun is just beating down relentlessly.
And you are feeling every single step.
Every muscle aches. You are covered in the dust of the road. And there is a constant lingering threat of bandits or wild animals the second the sun dips below the horizon.
The isolation would be completely terrifying.
It really would be. But then you crest a final hill, and in the distance, the stone walls of your destination break the skyline.
Yeah.
And all that exhaustion just fades into a sudden burst of song.
It is a total shift.
Welcome to Reformed Thinking. I am your host, and we are jumping into a brand new deep dive today. That emotional whiplash from grueling, dangerous isolation to overwhelming shared joy is what we are looking at today.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We do. We are pulling apart Charles Spurgeon's notes on Psalm 122, drawing from his classic work, The Treasury of David. The mission here is to figure out what ancient believers knew about gathered worship that modern society has, well, mostly forgotten.
And that historical friction between the danger of the road and the safety of the destination is really the best place to begin.
Let's set the scene for the listener. What is the context of this psalm?
So Psalm 122 falls into a category known as a Song of Degrees, or sometimes you hear called a Song of Ascent.
Right.
David wrote it, but he designed it for a very specific functional use.
Like a travel song?
Spot on. It was meant to be sung by the people of Israel as they traveled, as they literally ascended the topographical elevation toward Jerusalem for the high feasts.
Because Jerusalem sits up on a hill?
Yes, so the structure of this song documents a distinct psychological shift. The singer moves from a state of individual isolation in a scattered agrarian village.
Out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, out in the country. They move from that into a state of corporate anticipation.
They are looking forward to being part of a massive group.
Right. David writes this as a poet, looking forward to the future glory of the city under his son Solomon. So everything we read in this text is saturated with this eager anticipation.
The anticipation of stepping out of the vulnerable individual self and into the secure community of faith.
Yes.
So let's test that theory by looking right at the opening line.
Okay.
David says, "I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord."
It is such a famous line.
It is, but look at what is happening. He is not just thrilled about the destination.
Nope.
He is thrilled about the invitation. He is glad that others are saying, let us go.
Yeah, the text is very clear on that.
And I think this directly contradicts how society generally builds community today.
Oh, without a doubt.
We obsess over the architecture, the personal experience, the individual consumer preference. But David is reacting to the fact that his neighbors are pulling him along.
Spurgeon identifies what he calls a double joy in this verse.
Double joy. What does he mean by that?
Well, David is glad for his own sake, naturally. His heart is inclined toward the worship of God, and he desires to be in the holy place.
Sure, that makes sense.
But the phrasing reveals he is equally glad for the sake of his neighbors.
Oh, because they asked him.
Right. He rejoices that his companions possess the courage and the desire to invite him. The phrase is not a command. It is not, you go.
Right. It is let us go.
Yes. That implies a mutual encouragement. And it really challenges the highly individualized view of spirituality that dominates our current era.
Where faith is treated as just a private transaction.
Exactly. Just an individual alone with their thoughts, entirely detached from physical communion.
Yeah, modern culture loves the idea of solo spirituality.
But here, the desire to gather with believers, to be drawn into a physical space with them, is presented as a predictive indicator of a person's spiritual health.
Wow.
Yeah, a love for the gathered body indicates a soul being prepared for an eternal gathering.
There is a fantastic anecdote from our sources regarding Gregory Nazianzen's father that really illustrates how magnetic this mutual encouragement can be.
Oh, that is a great story.
It really is. So his father was a heathen, entirely outside the faith.
Right.
And his wife had repeatedly begged him to convert.
With absolutely zero success.
None. But the turning point came when this specific verse, Psalm 122, verse 1, was suggested to him in a dream.
Just the verse itself.
Yeah. The mere concept of being invited into the house of the Lord in that dream broke through his resistance.
It is amazing.
It really is. It wasn't some theological argument that changed his mind. It was the compelling nature of an invitation to community.
Which forces us to ask, what did the house of the Lord actually mean to these believers?
Right, because it wasn't just a building to them.
Well, Martin Luther offers a brilliant perspective on this very point.
What does he say?
Luther argued that we completely miss the mark if we look at this text and only see a building. He noted that the true temple was not beautiful because of its physical construction.
It wasn't the masonry.
No, it wasn't the massive stones or the timber, the gold, or the silver that mattered.
So what was the beauty?
For Luther, the true beauty of the temple was that the word of the Lord was heard there, that people called upon his name, and that they found him to be merciful. The physical architecture was completely secondary to the activity occurring within it.
So the gladness David felt was not about looking at shiny gold ornaments.
Not at all. It was about participating in a shared reception of God's mercy alongside other people.
I want to replace the standard modern analogy here.
Okay, go for it.
Usually people compared this verse to getting a text message from a friend saying, hey, let's go to a concert.
Right, which is a bit shallow.
Very. A concert invitation doesn't capture the stakes of the ancient world.
No.
So think of this more like soldiers who have been scattered in hostile territory, just trying to survive on their own.
That is a much better visual.
Right. When they finally receive the communication to regroup at a secure rendezvous point, the relief isn't just about the physical bunker.
It is about seeing the other soldiers.
Yes. When your fellow travelers say, let us go, they are acting as a circle of unity. Our source notes from Anthony Farrington describe this "we" as a bond of peace that makes many act as one.
A bond of peace. I like that.
When someone says, we are going, they are flatly refusing to leave you behind to face the wilderness alone.
And the linguistic shift in the next verse reflects that exact transition from the wilderness to the secure rendezvous point.
Verse 2.
Yeah, verse 2 declares, our feet shall stand within thy gates, O Jerusalem.
Such a triumphant statement.
Or, if you translate it more directly, our feet are standing.
Oh, interesting.
Notice the grammar there. The forward motion of the grueling travel has ceased.
They are not walking anymore.
Right. They are no longer walking, climbing, or resting nervously by the side of the road. They are standing.
And the location matters. Right.
Hugely. The location of where they are standing is crucial. It says, within the gates.
Because outside the gates is terrible.
Exactly. In the ancient world, to be outside the gates of a fortified city was to be entirely exposed. Outside meant danger, wild animals, and potential destruction.
Bandits.
Yeah, all of it. Stepping inside the gates meant seclusion, serenity, and salvation.
The walls provided an absolute physical barrier against the chaos of the exterior world.
They did.
But let's bring this into reality for the listener.
Okay.
If you are sitting in traffic on a Tuesday morning, or maybe walking into a standard office building, you do not have literal walled cities that you retreat into for worship.
Most of us don't know.
So what does standing within the gates mean for someone whose physical environment lacks these literal stone barriers?
That is a great question. The physical security of Jerusalem's walls maps directly onto the spiritual security of being integrated into a local body of believers. The gates are highly functional,
Yeah.
They are open to let the travelers in, but they are shut to keep the enemies out.
So the church acts as the walls.
Right. Standing within the gates represents an honorable and secure posture. It is a place of refuge from the sliding snares and the moral chaos of the outside world.
The joy of the travelers is the realization that they have crossed the threshold from vulnerability into safety.
The gathered church functions as that walled city.
To really visualize that moment of crossing the threshold, the sources introduce this amazing historical travel account from a guy named Dr. Clark.
Yes, the account of his travel in the East.
Right. He was traveling with a massive procession of people,
A huge group.
and they were climbing these extended, heavy ranges of eastern hills. They were totally exhausted from the dust and the heat.
This completely drained.
But when the foremost travelers finally reached the summit of the last hill and the city broke the horizon, they just threw their hands up.
And gestures of sheer joy.
Yeah, and they shouted, "The holy city! The holy city!"
Oh, wow.
And then everyone behind them started rushing forward just to get a glimpse. That physical arrival creates a massive psychological release.
It is a phenomenal image. And it is used frequently by theologians to describe the ultimate threshold a believer crosses at the end of life.
You mean death?
Yes. Edward Payson, a minister in the early 19th century, utilized this exact imagery during his dying experience.
What did he say?
He described the celestial city coming into full view as he approached death. He said the glories were beaming upon him, the breezes fanning him.
That is beautiful.
And because the vision of that secure city was so grand and overwhelming, he said the river of death, which, terrifies the human mind.
Of course.
He said it now appeared to him as nothing more than an insignificant little rill that could be crossed in a single step.
Just a tiny stream.
Yeah. The physical arrival at the gates of earthly Jerusalem becomes a miniature model of the believer's final arrival at the gates of the New Jerusalem.
I need to clarify something regarding the phrasing, though. The phrase, "our feet shall stand."
Okay, what about it?
If they are singing this on the road while they're walking, are they physically standing in the city at that moment?
That is the big debate.
Or, as the sources suggest, have they antedated the joy? Like, are they essentially time-traveling emotionally, borrowing tomorrow's relief to pay for today's exhaustion?
That is a highly perceptive way to frame it. Spurgeon suggests that both interpretations carry weight.
Okay.
It could be the triumphant song of actual physical arrival, like they just walked through the gate.
Sure.
But it is equally plausible that their faith and anticipation were so strong that they antedated the joy. They were so sure of their destination, so confident in the safety that awaited them behind those walls, that they sang of the standing while still engaged in the walking.
That is incredible. The sheer certainty of arriving at the gates fueled their physical endurance on the road.
Yes, the mind was already at rest, even while the legs were still climbing.
So they have crossed this threshold and survived the road.
Right.
But physical walls only keep the outside threats at bay. True survival in the ancient world required internal cohesion.
Without a doubt.
That is why David immediately shifts his focus from the walls to the actual urban planning.
He looks at the city itself.
He does. He says, Jerusalem is builded as a city that is compact together. So let's strip away the poetry for a second. What does compact together actually mean for ancient urban defense?
The architecture of Jerusalem was deliberate and highly functional. David sees that it is not a loose collection of temporary tents.
Not a campsite.
No, it is not a wasteland, and it is not what some historians call a city of magnificent distances.
A city of magnificent distances, what is that?
It means a long, straggling street with massive, undefended spaces between the homes.
Ah, like a sprawling suburb.
Right. But in Jerusalem, the allotted space inside the walls is entirely filled. It is a solid block, a massive unity.
And that matters for defense.
It was a primary defense mechanism. Think about it. If you have large gaps between structures, an enemy can infiltrate one section of the town without the other sections even noticing.
They could just slip through the cracks.
Yeah, but in a compact city, no single quarter of the town could be surprised or sacked by an enemy without the rest of the town instantly knowing about it and responding.
An attack on one wall was immediately felt by the entire population.
Spot on.
Let's translate that sociological reality to a modern gathered body.
Okay, how so?
Think about the anatomy of the human body.
Okay.
If you have a limb that is isolated from the central nervous system or cut off from the primary blood supply, that limb becomes incredibly vulnerable.
Right, it goes numb.
It weakens, it loses feeling, eventually it dies. The strength of the limb relies entirely on being compact with the rest of the body.
That is a great analogy.
Because the nervous system instantly transmits pain from the foot up to the brain, rallying the entire organism to respond to the threat.
Yes.
We hear the phrase, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. That is the spiritual equivalent of a central nervous system keeping a body compact together.
It really is.
If your local gathering is just a loose association of strangers who happen to sit in the same room once a week, you are living in a city of magnificent distances. You are spiritually vulnerable to being surprised and sacked.
A loose association provides zero mutual defense.
None.
A compact city means everyone shares the burden of defense and the joy of peace. The text actually compares this unified city to a flawless diamond.
A flawless diamond.
Because a diamond is strong precisely because its internal structure is tightly bonded and undivided.
Right, there are no gaps in the carbon.
Exactly. But Spurgeon issues a stark warning here about the terrifying reality that some bodies of believers fail to maintain this compactness.
What happens to them?
Instead of being a solid block, they are periodically blown to fragments by internal strife, party spirit, and contention.
Blown to fragments.
Yeah. And as he wryly notes, no gracious person is glad to be anywhere near the building when those internal explosions take place.
The blast radius is awful.
The walls might keep the bandits out, but internal dissension will destroy the city from the inside.
Which naturally leads to the next big question.
Who is inside?
Right. If the city is a solid block, who's actually filling these compact streets? Who is living shoulder to shoulder in this flawless diamond?
Verse 4 gives us the demographic.
Whither the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, unto the testimony of Israel, to give thanks unto the name of the Lord.
The sociological shock of this verse really cannot be overstated.
Why is it shocking?
Well, Israel was a nation, but it was heavily divided by tribal individuality. You had the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin, Manasseh, Ephraim.
Right, 12 distinct tribes.
And in their daily lives, back in their home territories, those surface distinctions mattered a great deal. They had different lands, different regional customs, varying dialects, and different local leaders.
They weren't a monolith.
No, they frequently experienced intense tribal rivalries and animosities. We see that all over the historical books.
Sure.
But when they go up to Jerusalem, they sink those surface distinctions into a national unity.
They drop the beef.
Yes. They do not go up as independent competing factions. They go up as the tribes of the Lord.
They recognize that despite their regional differences, they are all equally the Lord's property.
They are alike, chosen, sustained, and upheld by Jehovah. The shared identity supersedes the tribal identity.
Wait, I want to pause on Martin Luther's point here about what David leaves out of this description.
The golden letters comment?
Yes, because the verse gives us the two main reasons they are gathering: the testimony of Israel and to give thanks unto the name of the Lord.
Right.
But if you asked anyone on the street in ancient Israel what happens at the temple, the first thing they would mention is the sacrifices.
Of course. The sacrificial system was the main visual.
The blood, the altars, the smoke, the priests. Yet David completely ignores the physical rituals.
Luther says these words ought to be written in golden letters, specifically because of that omission.
It is a massive omission.
It is. The sacrifices, the blood of bulls and goats, the burning incense, the oblations, all of these things were strictly commanded by God to be performed at the temple.
Right.
Yet in this song, celebrating the gathering of the tribes, David highlights the teaching of the word, the testimony, and the offering of prayer and praise, the thanksgiving.
He elevates the spiritual reality over the ceremonial shadow.
He really does.
Look at the tension there between testimony and thanksgiving. I view it as a continuous closed-loop system.
How do you mean?
Well, the testimony of Israel is the intake. It is the people receiving from God, hearing the word, learning his character, and understanding his law.
Right, breathing in.
And the thanksgiving is the output. It is the people giving back to God through prayer, praise, and gratitude. Breathing out.
Oh, that is good.
You receive the testimony, it alters your internal state, and you return thanksgiving. This creates a feedback loop that blesses both God and man.
And that gratitude naturally spills over onto the people standing compactly next to you.
You cannot be truly thankful in a vacuum.
No, you really cannot. That continuous loop of receiving truth and responding with gratitude is the engine of the gathered body.
But engines need maintenance.
They do. And for that engine to run smoothly, for that unified city of diverse tribes to function without tearing itself apart, there must be a mechanism of governance to secure its peace.
Because you cannot just put people from Manasseh and Ephraim in a compact space without a way to resolve their disputes.
Yeah, they will end up fighting.
But let's be honest, putting the words throne and judgment next to each other does not scream joy to a modern listener.
No, not at all.
If I hear thrones of judgment, my first instinct is not to start singing. My first instinct is to call a lawyer.
Yeah, judgment sounds harsh to us today.
So why were these travelers celebrating the governance of the city in verse 5? For there are set thrones of judgment, the thrones of the house of David.
Our modern flinching at the word judgment reveals a failure to understand the ancient reality of systemic corruption.
Okay, unpack that.
If you were a peasant living in an agrarian village, local justice was often heavily biased. You might face a local magistrate who was easily bribed by your wealthy neighbor.
Or a judge who favored his own family members?
Right. Oppression was the daily reality. But when those peasants came up to Jerusalem, they could bring those difficult cases to the royal seat.
Knowing that the king would decide righteously?
Exactly. Righteous judgment is the absolute guarantee of fairness. If you are the oppressor, a throne of pure judgment is terrifying.
Sure.
But if you are the oppressed, if you have been cheated or marginalized, a true and uncorrupted throne of judgment is a source of immense relief.
Righteous men love judgment because it ensures that right will be rewarded and iniquity will be halted.
And the physical setup of these thrones communicated that guarantee of fairness.
How so?
Well, the sources describe an incredibly intimidating visual spectacle.
Oh, Arthur Penryn Stanley details this, right?
He does. He details the actual throne of Solomon. It was constructed of ivory brought all the way from Africa or India.
Just massive wealth.
Yes. The king sat on the back of a golden bull, flanked by 6 golden lions on each side of the steps leading up to it. It acted as a literal gate of justice.
That visual spectacle was designed to project authority, but Henry Smith adds a detail about the orientation of these seats that projects transparency.
The rising sun.
Yes. The seats in the gate were deliberately framed so that the judges had to sit with their faces toward the rising sun.
Which is brilliant.
It was a highly symbolic physical posture. It was a constant visual guarantee to the judges and to the people standing before them that their judgment should be as pure and clear from corruption as the sun in its chiefest brightness.
The piercing light of the sun would theoretically expose any shadow of bribery or partiality.
The visual transparency of the justice disarmed the tribal animosity.
Because they knew they would get a fair hearing.
And because this transparent justice exists at the center of the city is capable of maintaining true peace.
You cannot have peace without justice.
If the scales are rigged, the city will eventually riot.
Always.
And that realization leads directly into the most famous invocation of the psalm in verses 6 and 7. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee. Peace be within thy walls and prosperity within thy palaces.
The Hebrew text here is just phenomenal.
Let's look at the original language here, because there is a rhythm to the Hebrew that we completely lose in English.
We really do. The linguistic layer uncovered by the scholar Samuel Cox is masterful. It is a brilliant play on words.
Lay it out for us.
So in Hebrew, the word for peace is shalom.
Okay.
And the word for prosperity is shalva.
Shalva.
Right. And the name Jerusalem is Yerushalayim.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When the poet writes this, he is literally wishing shalom and shalva upon shalom.
The sound of the words themselves creates a rhythm of peace.
It is a linguistic reinforcement of the theological reality.
I need to translate the word prosper for a modern audience, though.
Because we carry baggage with that word.
Tons of baggage. Today, prosperity is almost exclusively tied to financial metrics. It means getting a promotion, buying a bigger house, maximizing your retirement account.
A prosperity gospel.
Yeah. If someone tells you that you will prosper by loving the church, it sounds like a financial transaction.
Right. But Albert Barnes clarifies this beautifully, stripping away our modern financial assumptions.
What does Barnes say?
In this context, prosper does not mean accumulating material goods or worldly wealth. The essential Hebrew idea is quietness, security, and rest.
Ooh, rest.
Yes. The prosperity promised here is peace of conscience. It is an internal stability amidst life's inevitable storms.
It is not about a bank account.
No. It is even peace in the prospect of death and the grave, much like Edward Payson experienced. It is the tranquility of a soul that knows it is secure within the walls, resting under righteous judgment.
Speaking of those walls, the historian Josephus describes Jerusalem as having 3 ranges of walls.
3 layers of defense.
Yeah, it wasn't just a single barrier, it was a trinity of security. An enemy army had to breach 3 massive stone defenses just to touch the people inside.
That is wild.
The prosperity is the knowledge that those walls hold.
The people recognized that disrupting the internal peace of this heavily fortified city was a dangerous thing to do. There is a striking Jewish proverb quoted in the text.
Let's hear it.
It says, "None ever took a stone out of the temple, but the dust did fly into his eyes."
Oh, that is vivid.
It is the exact reverse of the prosperity promised to those who love the city. Those who try to dismantle the peace of the body, those who pick away at the stones of unity through gossip, division, or tribal animosity.
They will inevitably suffer for it.
The dust will blind them. Attempting to destroy the compact nature of the city is an act of self-sabotage.
Let's apply that directly to the listener.
Okay.
When you close your eyes and pray, do you ever pray for the peace of the believers around you?
It is a tough question.
Or are your prayers entirely consumed by your own individual needs, like your job, your health, your personal anxieties?
We all default to that.
We do.
Yeah.
But David commands us to pray for the peace of the gathered body. Spurgeon uses a fantastic phrase to illustrate this. He says the bird of paradise thrives in the calm of communion, not the hurricane of debate.
The hurricane of debate. That describes so much of modern life.
Doesn't it? If you want your local gathering to thrive, it requires the calm of communion. You have to actively pray for the cessation of the hurricane.
This prayer for peace is not a self-serving desire to have a quiet place to sit on Sundays.
No.
The text shows us that the prayer expands outward. It is motivated by a deep, active care for others, which emerges clearly as we move into the final verses.
Read verses 8 and 9 for us.
For my brethren and companions' sakes, I will now say, peace be within thee. Because of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek thy good.
I see two major motivations emerging there. The first is philanthropy.
Meaning love for mankind.
Right. A genuine love for family, friends, and neighbors. And the second is a supreme love for God. You pray for the peace of the city because you love the people in it, and you love the God who built it.
The believer understands that they are bound by a covenant relation to Jehovah, and therefore they are bound to pray for his people.
It is an obligation, but a joyful one.
And the benefits of this peaceful, flourishing body do not stay locked inside the walls. A healthy, unified group of believers acts as salt and savor to the entire surrounding society.
The peace cultivated inside the walls spills over.
It positively affects the children, the neighbors, and the fellow countrymen who interact with the citizens of that city.
Yeah.
The internal peace becomes an external witness.
To illustrate how radical this concept of brethren truly is, let's look at the story from the missionary William Gill.
This is one of the most intense stories in the notes.
It is. He was working with an elderly native who had formerly been a cannibal.
Right.
This man was addressing the local church members, and he started his speech by saying, "Brethren."
And then he just stops.
He paused for a moment, completely marveling at the word he had just used. He told the congregation that heathenism had absolutely no such concept until the gospel arrived.
Just think about that.
The idea that people from different warring tribes, people who previously would have literally consumed one another, could sit compactly together, share a common identity, and call each other brethren was a complete sociological shock.
That is the function of the gospel, to create a new society out of fractured individuals. But maintaining that society requires deliberate effort. The theologian Joseph Irons comments on the phrase, "I will seek thy good."
What does Irons say?
He notes that this is not a loose, careless wish. It is not like casually looking around on the floor for a dropped pin where you give up after 5 seconds if you don't immediately see it.
Right, it is not passive.
To seek thy good demands throwing your energies, your faculties, your property, and your time into a deliberate, sustained effort. It requires a massive allocation of personal resources.
Let's use the analogy of a shareholder in a ship.
Okay, I like maritime analogies.
In the days of ancient maritime trade, the risks were astronomical. If you owned a share in a merchant ship, your entire fortune was tied up in its voyage.
Every storm was a threat to your wallet.
You tracked the weather patterns, you cared intensely about the competence of the crew, and you desperately wanted that ship to reach its harbor safely.
Because your personal prosperity was entirely tied to its success.
Yes. If the ship sank, you were ruined. If you pray for the church, you have a venture in every ship of prayer that makes a voyage to heaven. You are a shareholder in the spiritual success of your brethren.
Passive affection is utterly insufficient.
You cannot just stand on the dock and say, "Well, I hope the ship does well," while refusing to invest in the cargo or repair the sails. True affection leads to active seeking.
You look for ways to benefit the people standing compactly next to you.
Because their spiritual survival is tied to your own.
Synthesizing this entire progression reveals a masterful map of the believer's experience.
Walk us through it one more time.
It begins on the dusty, dangerous road with the initial relief of an invitation from a friend. Let us go.
The double joy.
Right. Then it moves to the physical and psychological safety of standing within the secure, functional walls.
Inside the gates.
Inside, the traveler marvels at the unified, compact structure of the city, recognizing how diverse rival tribes merge into a single, cohesive people.
The flawless diamond.
Yes, they gather to participate in the continuous loop of receiving the testimony and returning thanksgiving.
Breathing in and breathing out.
They find genuine rest in the transparent, uncorrupted judgment of the King, which guarantees fairness and halts oppression.
Facing the rising sun.
And finally, all of this internal joy and security translates into an outward, active seeking of peace for the sake of the brethren.
That progression moves you from a solitary, vulnerable walker on a dangerous road to an active, invested shareholder in a flawless diamond of a city.
And this leaves us with a final reality to consider. We have spent this time analyzing the earthly Jerusalem of David's era.
Historical city.
We have examined its physical walls of stone, its ivory thrones, and its mortal judges. But that earthly city was a shadow a temporary physical structure prone to eventual destruction.
Right.
If that shadow could evoke such overwhelming gladness and eager travel from David and the pilgrims, how much more eagerly should we anticipate the gathering in the eternal heavenly city?
The New Jerusalem.
In that city, the king himself is the direct source of light, requiring no sun. The justice is perfectly transparent, the security is absolute, and the walls will never be breached.
So we leave you with this challenge today. Evaluate your current anticipation.
Look inward.
When your alarm goes off on a Sunday morning, or when you receive a text from a friend inviting you to gather, does your internal reaction mirror even a fraction of the joy David felt for the earthly shadow of things to come?
Are you genuinely glad when they say unto you, let us go?
That is something to sit with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive on Reformed thinking. We will catch you next time.